Hello, everyone. Welcome to Attica Night Talk. Let's talk about a big news today. Pope Leo XIV announced that he is about to embark on his first trip to the Muslim world during his tenure. As soon as the news came out, media and political figures around the world began to interpret it. Many say it's a continuation of the new era's dialogue. There are also voices expressing concern that this is a compromise and a dilution of one's beliefs. I want to say today that neither of these views hits the mark. The Pope's visit is neither a simple gesture of goodwill nor a compromise. This is a carefully planned strategic advance. This is an action rooted in the deepest principles of conservatism, defending one's own traditions, recognizing the true opponent, and using wisdom to exert strength. To understand the move the Pope is making today, we must first lay out the chessboard of history and see how Rome has come this far over the past 6 decades. Before the 1960s, the relationship between the Catholic Church and the Islamic world was basically an old account written for thousands of years. There was deep estrangement and mutual distrust between the two sides. But since the 1960s, the Holy See has made a major strategic adjustment. At the core of this adjustment was the declaration Our Times, issued in 1965. This document completely changed the rules of the game. It says the Catholic Church does not reject truly holy elements from other religions. Specifically speaking of Islam, the Church acknowledges that there are many commonalities between the two. For instance, both worship the one and only God who created the world. Both revere Abraham, also known as Ibrahim in Islam. Though they do not recognize Jesus as God, they honor him as a prophet and also honor his mother Mary. Most importantly, the document calls on Christians and Muslims to forget the past and work together for social justice, moral order, peace, and freedom. This decision is not a sign of weakness. A weak, unconfident organization will only shut itself in the wall. Only the strong, who have enough confidence in themselves, dare to go out, set the agenda, and change the way they interact with their opponents. So the turn of the Second Vatican Council is not an intellectual surrender, but a strategic initiative. It marked the transformation of the Church from a closed fortress to an open forum. When the rules were changed, someone was needed to enforce them. The first person to put the new rule into practice was Pope John Paul II. The Pope was a true doer, and his life creed was "Don't be afraid." Having experienced both Nazi and communist totalitarian regimes, he is well aware that ideological struggles need to be won by the power of action and symbolism. His series of actions all made history. For instance, he was the first pope in 1,000 years to visit Greece and reached out to his Orthodox brothers. And the most shocking step came in 2001. He visited Syria and entered the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. It was the first time in history that a pope had stepped into a mosque. The symbolic significance of this action was immense. It broke a 1,000-year-old taboo and declared with action that past hostility could become history. John Paul II, with his courage, opened up a new path for the Roman Curia. If John Paul II was a courageous pioneer, then his successor Benedict XVI was a cautious scholar. He was more concerned with clarity of thought and purity of faith. He believes that in an age of faith crisis, the Church should not compromise with the secular society, but rather hold fast to its doctrines. His conservative style is even reflected in his restoration of much of the traditional papal attire. The scholar pope faced the biggest crisis of his tenure in 2006. He gave a speech at the University of Regensburg in Germany, which was a purely academic one. In his speech, he quoted the words of a 14th century Byzantine emperor who criticized certain teachings of Islam as evil and inhumane, and that the faith was spread by the sword. The quote immediately caused a stir in the Muslim world around the globe. Although Benedict XVI's intention was to explore the relationship between faith and reason, and he himself has repeatedly opposed equating Muslims with terrorists, the incident still caused a huge diplomatic disaster. The papacy had to come forward to apologize and explain that the Pope merely condemned violence in the name of religion. However, the crisis also brought an extremely valuable lesson. Benedict XVI mended the rift with his own actions. He then visited Turkey and prayed with the local imam at the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. The move was of great significance. The Regensburg incident made Rome realize that mere goodwill and bravery are not enough, and that dialogue with another great civilization requires great wisdom and prudence. The power of words is immense, and even the slightest misunderstanding can lead to great disaster. Benedict XVI's experience adds an essential layer of realism and depth of thought to the Church's foreign strategy. He paved the way for later popes with a painful lesson, making everyone understand that this path should be walked both bravely and carefully. Now, the era of Leo XIV has come. He inherited the experiences and lessons of the previous decades. He had the courage of John Paul II and the caution of Benedict XVI. He was going to take a third path that combined the wisdom of his predecessors. What is the core goal of this path? Not for theological unity, which is almost impossible. His aim is to establish a de facto union of believers, uniting the Islamic world against a more dangerous enemy that both sides face. That is, the global wave of radical, materialist secularization. In this era, the greatest threat to traditional beliefs no longer comes from other religions, but from a powerful culture that attempts to drive God out of all public life. This culture denies objective truth, deconstructs family values, and upholds material pleasures. In the face of this common challenge, all believers have a basis for cooperation. In recent years, the Vatican has begun to work in this direction, such as Pope Francis' document on human brotherhood signed in 2019 and the subsequent encyclical Brothers. This point has been emphasized. These documents call on people of different faiths to come together as brothers to build a more peaceful and just world. What Leo XIV has to do now is to turn the idea of brotherhood from a paper document into a solid strategic alliance. He was not saying all faiths are the same, but that all believers face the same enemy. This is not a mixture of religions, but a practical cooperation taken to defend common values. These common values include the dignity of life, the importance of family, and the right to uphold faith itself in a world without God. Finally, we need to see the most realistic and hardcore side of this visit. The Pope is not only the spiritual leader of more than 1 billion Catholics around the world, but also the head of state of a sovereign state. Every one of his visits is a sophisticated diplomatic act. Behind the public handshakes, hugs, and speeches lies a more important agenda: protecting the Christian minority living in Muslim countries. For these large but vulnerable groups, the Pope's visit itself is the most powerful protective barrier. When the top leader of a country gives a grand welcome to the Pope of Rome, and when the most influential imam has a heart-to-heart talk with him, it sends a clear signal to the whole society that local Christians are protected and their rights need to be respected. That's the real power. Only weak leaders would hide behind the wall and attack others with fierce words. A strong leader will walk confidently into his opponent's territory and, through contact and dialogue, secure a living space and security for his people. The Pope is using his global prestige and moral authority as a geopolitical tool to fulfill one of the most fundamental conservative tasks: to protect his flock. So, let's look back at this visit of Leo XIV. This is not a sudden whim, but an inevitable outcome of the strategic evolution of the Roman Curia over the past 6 decades. This path began with the foresight of the Second Vatican Council, was opened up by the courage of John Paul II, and was corrected by the prudent wisdom of Benedict XVI. It was on this solid foundation that Leo XIV took a decisive step today. This trip to the East demonstrated the Church's absolute confidence in its own faith. It is strong enough to dare to touch. It is wise enough to know whom to unite and whom to fight. It is also pragmatic enough to know how to use diplomatic tactics to protect its most vulnerable children. This is the true meaning of conservative leadership, rooted in tradition, looking to the future, full of principles, courage, and strategic vision. That's all for this episode of Attica Night Talk. See you next time.